hands whose parents also wanted them to become doctors, engineers, programmers? If this was the case, I could probably raise both of my hands. As a 17-year-old student whose parents are also doctors, I can really say that the pressure is on. Getting an insight to the medical field is great and all, but it did create this anxiety, this ambition in me to always be better, to always strive for success. And as my Cuban parents used to say, cuando yo era niña, yo estaba clasificada como uno de los más altos de todo Cuba, con uno de los GPAs más altos. And for those who don't speak the barbaric language of my ancestor Spanish, this merely translates to when I was a kid, I used to be classified as one of the highest in all of Cuba and one of the highest GPAs. And so, with that legacy, many mediocre jobs were almost seen as flipping burgers at McDonald's. And throughout our high school years, this parental mentality isn't too far off. However, we tend to oversimplify it. We don't see and acknowledge the amount of blood, sweat, and tears that are put into such demanding jobs. And through this pandemic, our attitude needs to change. In a year that seems to have no resolution, we, as a society, we as humans, are more disconnected than ever. With millions of families void of jobs, economies crashing, and many more left without food, it would be a blank understatement to say that we have failed. And yet, anxiety as a whole has disconnected us. And the truth of the matter is, we're afraid. We're afraid of losing our jobs, of not having food on the table, receiving a call that a loved one has contracted a deadly disease and may not wake up. And though these fears are rational, they can instantaneously lead to a sense of regret. But they're inherently what makes us human. As a French philosopher known as Michel de Montaigne said, "He who fears he shall suffers already suffers what he fears." And this quote became more prevalent 2 years ago near spring break, when I received a call, one to mourn about, one that I never thought I would receive. The tragedy of my cousin, who died in a car accident. Just being woken up by the screams and cries of my parents, asking, how could this have happened? Why could this have happened? It began to tear me. One of the most responsible people I knew who committed an irresponsible mistake. And recently, losing my uncle to a brain hemorrhage was another burden I had to bear. And when it was caught, half of his brain was already dead. Though these experiences are hard to cope with, they must often be dealt with. Because these misfortunes made me realize that the pain of losing someone was never temporary. It was merely an eternity of suffering that is learned to tame. This tore me into pieces, not only emotionally, but mentally. I began to suffer and wonder, why could this have happened? How could this have happened? And along the way, I even developed social anxiety, just an irrational fear of speaking with anyone in fear that I would learn to love, but also to grieve through the process. I remember it would sometimes get so bad that my heart rate would drastically increase, and I'd begin myself to feel lightheaded and dizzy. And though these forms of afflictions will be felt a few times throughout our lives, many medical practitioners will have to deal with these forms of afflictions more times than our hands can count. As said by Sherry Franklin in the New York Times article, the directive care of the intensive unit had to choose which patients would be supported by ventilators and other equipment. Hurricane Sandy was bearing down on Bellevue Hospital in 2012, and the main generators were about to fail. Dr. Laura Evans would be left with only 6 power outlets for the unit's 50 patients. The quote, "You can't save everyone," has been thrown around, whether that be in TV shows, movies, or even the real world. But the idea that you don't always have your situations under control begins to claw at you. You begin to ponder to yourself and ask, what could I have done? What could I have done differently? How could I have saved them? Medical practitioners ask themselves and slam themselves with these questions every day because they realize that with such a demanding job, these set of circumstances are never under their control. Because to win the war, you must often sacrifice some battles. And learning from these experiences and forms of grieving, I began to find my calling, my passion for medicine, my passion to help others so that those who are suffering won't have to give their family members the same type of grievance I had to deal with. And along the way, I was able to turn my anxiety into a fuel to learn. And through the years, I've kept 2 ideas constant. One, I will be true to myself no matter the predicament. And two, I will learn from my mistakes and fail often and hard. Why? For that same reason. To learn from my mistakes so I have less likelihood of committing them later on in life when they truly matter. However, mistakes are inevitable. They will happen. No matter how perfect or hard you try to be, they will happen. However, these mistakes shouldn't define you. Only how you choose to resolve them should. Society has encrypted into our heads that when we commit failures, we inherently are one. However, this is far from the reality of things. And the truth of the matter is, in a field such as medicine, you are constantly learning from your mistakes and improving. For example, a doctor may try to provide a patient with a treatment. However, if the treatment doesn't go well and their condition worsens or the condition is incurable to begin with, in the eyes of many, this could be seen as a form of failure. However, in the field of medicine, you are constantly learning and evolving no matter what. In the eyes of patients, many of these years spent slaving away on books and shadowing could be seen as flipping a burger at McDonald's. Too many times, you can find a patient barging into a clinic demanding for a diagnosis to be made. Why? Because their stomach pain was told that by WebMD that it was actually a sign of appendicitis or gastric cancer, and not just how much birthday cake they slipped into their face at their birthday party for the niece. However, when doctors try to provide this diagnosis, many patients become conflicted and reassured that their healthcare providers are wrong and that Google has the right reason. However, patients begin to distrust their doctors and not always take what they say seriously. And through this pandemic, this begins to have a drastic effect on our future generation of health, medical students. As said by Kathleen Franco, MD, roughly 6% of medical students never achieve their dreams in those 7 years or more. However, the majority of those that drop out or fail have two mindsets in common. One, those who do it for the money, or two, those who do it to achieve others' dreams. And you see that medical schools are able to weed out the bad apples. However, when students and medical students begin to read articles and forms of patients continuously refusing to accept the advice of professionals, anxiety becomes to run more rampant. In an analysis done by Bokak Strand and fellow other colleagues, they carried out a cross-sectional study to find out the global prevalence of anxiety among medical students. And using sources of heterogeneity, they concluded that with 69 studies composed of 40,348 medical students, that the global prevalence rate of anxiety among medical students was a whopping 33.8%, nearly a little bit more than one third. And this may seem like a minuscule amount, but when you begin to factor in how many people apply to medical schools each year, the numbers slowly begin to pile in. And throughout this era and these unprecedented times, doctors and nurses are being viewed a little more respected, and that's great. However, this shouldn't only be the case during a pandemic. Doctors and nurses should be taken care of and respected among any era because they're single-handedly responsible for one of humans' biggest necessities, health. We need to come to an understanding. We need to realize that doctors are not just some demon or monster hiding underneath your bed, waiting to bring you down. No, they're one of the very few people who truly care for your health, apart from you and your family. We need to be able to recreate this bridge again, this bridge of trust between doctors and patients. Why? Because even though technology may be advancing, that human-to-human interaction that we share will never cease to exist. However, doctors single-handedly care for you. They want to see you succeed. They want to see you have a fruitful life. However, if for the rare reason that your healthcare provider isn't providing your benefits, because medicine is a field of service, not of gain. And if you feel that your doctor isn't providing the service you need, by all means, it's in your best interest to switch primary care because you should be responsible for your own benefit and they should be there to acquire and help you. However, this notion that doctors are trying to get you should really come to an halt because we need to conversate, to mend, and to forgive. The biggest lesson and biggest message I want to leave here with you all today is that those who suffer from anxiety, know that you're not alone. Know that I can relate because I too have been down the same rabbit hole where you feel that no one loves you or no one cares for you. However, I hope that you realize that many people care for you, many people love you, and they want to see you succeed. They want you to have a fruitful future, a family. They want to see you have a prosperous life. And this doesn't exclude our professionals. Why? Because they're also humans too. They also have lives, ambition, goals, lovers, and they too are human. And for those who do suffer from anxiety, I want you to know that you will and you can get through this. Whatever situation you're going through, please stay strong. As one of my favorite teachers, Mr. Mark Mino, used to say, inch by inch, life is a cinch. Yard by yard, life is hard. Learn to look at the smaller images in life, not always the bigger picture. Why? Because when you do, get overwhelmed with stress. You tend to start thinking, I have to finish this, and not, I can slowly do this to achieve a higher order. I know when my anxiety levels are very high, I like to do physical exertion. I'll either hit the gym, play music, or even just work out, play basketball. Why? Because I'm able to relieve my stress and my anxiety through physical exertion. Also, having a way to take things seriously, but also enjoy them as you do them, makes your life a ton easier. I once went to FBA solos a few months ago to practice for a solo, and it's basically you get to play in front of a judge and they judge you off that music and you get to go to states. I spent 2 months practicing my music, getting it down. And when I went to perform, I received a superior. And now in a few months, I'm heading up to state to practice and to perform. And this was just a great feeling, knowing that my hard work was put into good use, knowing that what I have done paid off. And as you go through life, you'll be able to find your own niches on how you relieve stress. And one of the most underlooked aspects to relieve stress is just to take a step back and breathe. Breathe in and just breathe out. Why? Because it feels like a ton of armor has been carried off of your shoulders. However, whatever you do in life or wherever the journey takes you, learn to love, to live, and to laugh. Defining a good person is difficult. Why? Because good is subjective. It isn't the eye of the beholder. However, I think we as people can all agree that life takes us along trails, takes us to trails, through journeys, and they all go separate ways. And we can all agree that sometimes listening to others is an inconvenient task. Why? Because it's sometimes hard to listen to others when we ourselves have problems that we can't even resolve. However, there's a certain distinct lack of empathy that has separated our generation today. This distinct lack of empathy is why there's so much chaos. The difference between a good person and a regular person is that one trait, empathy, being empathetic. Being a good doctor doesn't necessarily mean to just be a professional. It means to be a good person first and foremost. Being empathetic is the ability to connect with others, to conversate with others, to connect. I don't know where life will take me, but whatever I choose, I hope it's with great ambition. I hope to be a cardiovascular surgeon, or through this TED Talk, I may have even doomed myself to an eternity of flipping burgers at McDonald's. However, wherever I go, I know that I will learn to love, to cherish, to mend, to conversate, and most importantly, to connect. Thank you.